Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today's book review is 1916 by Morgan Llywelyn. This is the first book in the Irish Century series about, I think there's 4 books, maybe 5. Off the top of my head, I can't recall how many books, but this is the first one. I reviewed the second one, which is titled 1921, back in March for St. Patrick's Day, because I was having a really hard time finding this book. And I think what happened is they were just completely redoing the look of this book and another one in this series. This is way bigger than the copy that I have, and it's also a little bit fancier inside. So whoever now has the rights, or half the rights, whatever it may be you call it, for traditional publishing, they're redoing the look, I think, for all of them, but I had to get 2 out of the 4 that I currently own used, and it was hard to find. But at least for 1916, 1949, that is newly released. Well, it's re-released. So 1916 is about what leads up to and during the Easter Rebellion of 1916, and a little bit after 1916, and it follows Ned Halloran, and I can't figure out if he is a real life person or not. I think he's a fictional character, but I like that. I don't necessarily enjoy following people that were real. I prefer reading and writing a main character and a few side characters that are made up, and then everything around it is real type of thing. So you can do a little bit more with the fictional characters, especially if it's somewhat new, like the history is kind of not really as far back in the past. There is some problems of possibly being sued for defamation. I don't want to have anything to do with that. So, you know, prefer the fictional characters in historical fiction, because I know that other authors are thinking that way. I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. It's a bit of a low 5 out of 5 stars, but it's very well written, and actually I think it gives a bit of a better light to Ned. In the second book, which I read first, it follows Henry, his friend, who is also a journalist, and his story. So there are differences of the storytelling, and of course the characters are very different. I did not know that Ned is really young. We follow him at 15 years old, and the opening is that he survives the Titanic sinking, but everyone else that was with him on the Titanic dies. And then we go through his life as a teenager up to, like, I'm gonna say 18. And his connection with Patrick Pearse and other very famous men that were connected to the 1916 rebellion, and then ultimately what happens to them once that rebellion was squashed in Ireland. Now, I thought what it would be like a little weird, but maybe just weird for 2022, is that Henry is about 30 years old, and when he meets Ned helping him out in Dublin, Ned's like 16. So big friendship gap, okay, but during this time, not that weird. I can definitely see the narration being of like a very mature teenager, because the sinking of the Titanic and then losing friends in the rebellion of 1916 is enough for Ned. No, there's stuff that happens afterwards as well, and then also continuing on in 1921, the second book, but that's through Henry's eyes, and that's kind of his life and his story to tell. But I think it was actually interesting that I read the second book first, because in the second book, Ned's annoying. But now I understand why. He's not like 30, he's about 20-ish. And everything that happens to him is why he's so militant regarding Ireland's freedom, and there's no sway whatsoever. You can't knock him down in any way. He just keeps going, and he's a very angry person, unfortunately. Takes his frustrations a little bit out on Henry. You don't really see that in the first book, but you definitely see that in the second book, and then it makes sense. And I was reading reviews for the second book, and a lot of people said that it wasn't written in the same way as 1916 was, and I'm going to go out on a limb as a writer. Not as a reader, but as a writer. Morgan Llywelyn made the second book a little more journalistic in a sense, with a lot more facts. I mean, there's a lot of facts in this one, but there's like an enormous amount of facts and details, because Henry is a journalist, and that's how he would have written his works, or how he would have spoken about everything that's happening during this time. So I think we are seeing different narration in the eyes of the main character and how that goes about. And no, they're not the same, and the writing is like this in the second books, it's a bit more mature. Now Ned in 1916 is mature-ish in some ways, because he's seen a lot of stuff. He has overcome many of it, but not enough where it would match up with the 1921 writing of a 30-year-old journalist type of thing. Now, I know that there are a lot of details, even though Ned is not a journalist like Henry is in this first book. It's fairly long. It's almost 450 pages if you're getting this copy. I've read by other reviews that the original copy, I guess it was smaller, that was about 500 pages. So they did cut down a bit with I think the 6 inches by 9 inches. I'm not really gonna measure it to be for sure, no, but it got bigger, and therefore it got a little slimmer. But I don't think, unlike some other reviewers, that it was too long and too boring. But you really do have to get into Irish history. You have to also place yourself during the early 20th century, where yeah, your best friend is 30 years old, and you know, you're 16, 17, and then you finally turn 18, and but he's still way older than you. And then you also have to deal with, you know, just immersing yourself in a lot of facts. She has a lot of footnotes, or not footnotes, well, it's endnotes. There's a whole section in the back where we have a bibliography and notes about specific facts of history, or direct quotes. And then also there's a lot of Irish poems as well in this novel, mainly from Patrick Pearse, because he was a poet who also ran a school, the school that Ned went to after his parents died in the Titanic. That's his connection with Patrick Pearse. And I think the connections and the history, including the endnotes, even though some people don't like to have endnotes in historical fiction, this is for sure hardcore historical fiction. Morgan puts a lot of effort and time into her research, and I think she deserves to have endnotes. I am more distracted by footnotes. She doesn't have footnotes. It's all in the back. So I think it's a bit easier to digest. Even I think at one point in a few chapters, the endnotes were up to like 15, maybe 20. I was like, but I think she's queen of the endnotes and bibliographies. Something else that I enjoyed is that I read several of Patrick Pearse's poems, and so I could mark that I've read them on Goodreads, and that put me over for my reading challenge of 2022. So thank you very much. I totally counted it. It's a poem within a book, and that's how it's gonna go, because it counts. It totally counts. Thank you so much for watching my review of 1916 by Morgan Llywelyn. I definitely recommend it. I gave it 5 stars. If you're interested in a close look of the Irish Easter Rebellion of 1916, thank you and have a great rest of your day. Bye.